I am delighted to welcome Tasha Bailey, also known as Real Talk Therapist, to I Have Today. Tasha is a psychotherapist, content creator, writer, advocate, and speaker. And today she's going to be sharing her expertise around people pleasing. Welcome, Tasha.
Hi, thank you. What a lovely welcome. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for coming on today to talk about a subject I know so many of us need to understand more about and what we can do to help ourselves. But firstly, could you share with everyone listening more about yourself, who you are, and what you think people should know about you?
So I'm Tasha Bailey, and I'm a therapist from London, also a content creator. So I trained as a child and adolescent psychotherapist, love working with children, love working with adolescents, and also love working with adults. But I realized that a lot of people don't have access to therapy. And there's so much knowledge that therapists have that people who can't afford therapy could also do with that information. So I thought Instagram is free for everybody. And so, how can I make this information tangible and accessible and fun and engaging? And so, Real Talk Therapist was born. And since then, I've just been kind of playing with the lines between therapy and social media ever since. I'm really passionate about making mental health really accessible and fun, and also think about intersectionality as well. As a Black woman, I think that goes into everything that I do. So that's a bit about me, I think.
I love the work you do. I was so delighted when we had the chance for you to come on and speak to us. And your Instagram, I think it's fantastic because you talk about all kinds of subjects, people pleasing, which we're going into today, trauma. But one of the recent things that I saw on your Instagram grid was about Stranger Things and actually how you dissected part of someone's journey. I won't mention just in case there's any plot spoilers in there, and how that would relate to PTSD and trauma, and how certain elements of the storyline really spoke to how you could ground yourself.
Absolutely. It's definitely a kind of big, unique thing of me is I love looking for things in normal media situations. And I think that probably comes from my training because I'm trained specifically to think about how do I communicate with children and adolescents. And a lot of our inner child and our inner adolescent will look for things in songs and TV shows and films, and that's how we relate to ourselves. And so then when I'm watching Stranger Things or if I'm watching Love Island, I will find these little nuggets that I can use to show kind of this is describing mental health or attachment or this or trauma or PTSD, and give people those tools in a more, I don't know, visual way, a more relatable way. And I'm a big Netflix fan anyway, so that's always going to be everything that I do. So yeah, I love kind of combining those two worlds together.
That's wonderful. And I could talk to you about this forever. And maybe we could come back and do one specifically about Netflix and mental health. But today we're talking about people pleasing. Tell us what people pleasing is, because I think I know what it is, but it could be different for everyone. And there could be kind of universal elements to it. So, in your words, what is people pleasing?
I describe it in two ways. The first way is kind of more general, which is kind of a tendency to put ourselves last. So we put everybody else's needs before our own. That might come from a place of wanting to be liked or fearing rejection. I have to fit everybody's needs, otherwise they're going to hate me or dislike me. And then I think the other kind of definition that I kind of think about is it's also can be often a trauma response. So if we have grown up in a household where our needs were never met or our needs were always at the bottom of the list, we're going to learn to do that for ourselves, that actually we don't matter. Everybody else's needs has to come before ours. And so we become caretakers. We might end up being in friendships or relationships where we look after other people's feelings, or even in jobs where we do that and actually forget to look after ourselves. So that's kind of how I see people pleasing. It tends to be some kind of tendency that we kind of learn somewhere in our life where our boundaries get impacted, how we see ourselves gets impacted, and how we relate to each other gets impacted as well.
That almost absence of care for ourselves, or putting ourselves at the bottom of the pile and prioritizing other people. Because I guess when I think about people pleasing, I think more about the behavior rather than what's underneath that behavior. And you've just described there how it could be something that we learn very early on in life. Is that predominantly the case with people pleasing?
Yeah, it's usually early on in life. So maybe like our primary attachment family figures, or it might be from one of our first relationships, romantic relationships, that we then learned that actually that person couldn't look after our needs, and we had to then push our needs to the back of the list. So it's usually some kind of life experience, but I find usually the earlier that it's happened, the more difficult it is to unpack it, move away from it. It's harder when we've actually grown up with that, because it just builds and builds and builds.
It's more embedded, I guess. And the whole thing about people pleasing is generally there is something that's taught to us as children about being good, about pleasing other people. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that's something that women specifically tend to be told more about, being a pleasing person, a good person, a polite person. Do you think there's something about kind of societal's impressions on us that really embed that sense of to please people is to be a good person?
Yeah, this is where it gets really difficult, because niceness is always like seen, niceness and like being a hard worker and being all given, especially as a woman or especially as a person of color, is really glorified in society. So then when you're then thinking, okay, how do I look after my own needs? We can often go into a place of thinking, oh, that's selfish of me, I'm not allowed to do that, or go into a place of guilt, but then you're not being looked after. You know, you can keep going on that train of let me be nice, let me be a hard worker, let me do everything that I need to do except for look after me. And what will happen is it will tire us out emotionally or tire us out physically. And so we have to work out, how do I look after a bit of both? Me first, yes, but that doesn't mean I'm going to drop everything. It just means I need to be more considerate of how I put myself first here.
I love the phrasing of that, me first. It doesn't mean I have to drop everything or everyone else, but me first. And, you know, that old adage about putting on your oxygen mask first, because you can't help other people unless you have that oxygen. In terms of people pleasing, so there's this whole issue around how we're brought up, the kind of culture of niceness and being a good employer, a good child, daughter, husband, partner, you know, whatever that attachment is. What are the kind of day-to-day behaviours and issues that we would see in someone who is living with a people-pleasing demeanour?
The inability to say no. And this comes up a lot in people in their workplaces, where they're asked, can you do this? 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 And they say yes constantly, without thinking about, actually, what do I already have on my plate? Is it actually reasonable or possible for me to do all these things? Do I even want to do all these things? Is that part even my job? But because there's no pause to be able to reflect on those things, there's an instant, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. That person then ends up absolutely overwhelmed and often ends up resenting their jobs because of it, because they've then been overloaded, they're doing too much because they're not able to say no. And I think that again comes from a place of, I need to be an awesome employee. You know, I don't want to let them down, I don't want to disappoint, I want to get a promotion. All these things builds a picture of like, I need to be perfect, and perfect is not possible, we know that. But there's this internal system of like, I need to say yes to everything, otherwise I'll be letting them down. But what we actually do is we're letting ourselves down. So definitely like inability to say no is a huge one. And I think there's something like that, the metaphor that comes to mind for me is it's almost like each morning we bake a cake, and this cake represents our energy. And imagine we cut it up, and throughout the day, we just give it to each person. Okay, I'm going to give a slice to the postman, and a slice to the bus driver, and a slice to my friend here, and my employee, and da 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 da. And at the end of the day, we realize there's no cake left to us. We made this cake, it's our cake, but we actually haven't had any of it ourselves. That builds up resentment and frustration and just low motivation. And I think this is kind of also kind of what happens underlying when we are just people pleasing day to day.
The metaphor of the cake, for me, I can imagine the first day you might think, okay, I gave away the cake. Oh, the cake is gone. But on the 365th day of going through that cycle of, you know, your metaphor of giving away the cake, you're going to feel pretty angry, and you're going to have to change something about what you're doing, because you're coming home every day without that energy, without that cake, you know, because you're giving it all away. And it is something that you are doing, and you're doing from a place of wanting good, and yet it's bringing no good into your life. Can you say anything about the resentment that might come? Or you said low motivation.
Yeah, because you're essentially giving your love and your care and your energy, but you're never actually giving it to yourself. And yes, you might get external validation each time you give out a slice of cake, but it's not really going to fulfill your needs, because you're probably tired from baking cakes every morning. You're tired of the conversations that have to happen each time you give a slice of cake, and try not know what that tastes like for somebody because you never taste it yourself. So it can, yeah, it definitely does bring up a lot of resentment because it can be unmatched, you know, how much energy I'm giving out and to so many people versus how much I'm receiving myself being zero. The other thing is that when you are someone who people pleases and gives a lot of yourself, sometimes we can expect the other person, the receiver, to say, hey, it's okay, you don't have to give me so much cake, you know, you've done enough. They're not really going to do that. If I gave you a piece of cake and I said, oh, do you want some more? You're probably going to say, yeah, I can have that for later. I'll have it for tomorrow. The receiver is not going to tell you where your capacity is. You have to tell them where your capacity is. But I think what happens is we get scared of disappointing them.
So this is something I really wanted to pick apart with you is, as a people pleaser, would that person be expecting the other person or the people that they are pleasing to maybe put a stopper in on the amount of time they give them, perhaps regulate that gift of energy for them? Or are they expecting the same in return? Or are they giving what they're not getting themselves?
I think it's a bit of all three, actually. One thing I hear a lot of from clients that I've worked with is kind of like, I'm just going to do this one thing for that person and then they'll be okay. And then I can move on to myself. Yes, in a perfect world, yeah, sure. But life doesn't work like that. Life is complicated. So, you know, I can give a cake to that person, but in a couple of hours, they might be hungry again. Is it for me to feed them, or is it for me to show them where they can get some food or where they can find those resources? I think what happens is that when we are always catering for other people, it doesn't give them a chance to learn how to cater for themselves. And so they will always need you. And I think that's another kind of important part about people pleasing. There's a kind of slightly addictive feeling of like, I'm needed. Somebody really needs me and appreciates me. Yes, I'm not meeting my own needs, but there's something about they need me. That feels good. And maybe they didn't feel needed somewhere else in their life. So guilt as well. And this is kind of more thinking about, okay, when you've realized that actually I do have people pleasing qualities, I need to put in some boundaries or step away a little bit. Guilt often comes up, and that's absolutely normal. So guilt is a feeling that we have when we're doing something that is slightly against our normal values. So a client trying to step away from being so giving is going to make them feel guilty because they're so used to giving. They suddenly feel like they're really horrible because they're withholding something. So, you know, guilt is a natural thing that's going to come up, but it's about kind of finding out, how do I tolerate that a little bit? Because the guilt will kind of happen in the first instance when I'm making these changes, but after a while, I can step past that and know that it's actually the right thing for me.
And I would imagine people will react in a way that might give the people pleaser concern because they are changing a behavior. So I can imagine if you've always given someone cake and then you turn up one day and you say, I've not got the cake, that person's going to be disappointed. Now, as you've described, it's not right that they should be expecting that each and every day. And actually, in a way, you have set that expectation. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, because they're going to know that every morning at 10 a.m. you're bringing them a slice of cake. The day that you don't bring it, they're like, wait, where's my cake? I was expecting this. I was relying on this. But that's not fair on anybody, actually. You know, if I'm that people pleaser, I can teach that person how to make a cake for themselves. I can teach them so they can access it whenever they want to without having to rely on me to do it. That's kind of one way of giving them the skills that you've already developed and already had because you're people pleaser. You've had to learn all these skills and it's amazing. But another way of gifting them is to show them how to do that for themselves.
And that person might be fully equipped, but is also happy to take what you are giving as a people pleaser. So let's move on to the people pleaser and how they can move away from that. What are the kind of tools that someone who is exhibiting people pleasing behaviors can start to use? And also some of the barriers they might find. So, you know, we've just talked about the fact that they might encounter disappointment from somebody, but, you know, maybe it's that they have to continue to reassert their boundaries, or perhaps talk about the fact that they have been giving away too much. What are those things that we can do to support ourselves as people pleasers?
I think the first thing is really noticing anger and guilt when it comes up. I think these are really great feelings. To the contrary of what people think, I think resentment and anger are really helpful feelings because they tell us when we've given too much. They tell us when actually I need to stop giving and pause because I'm not feeling good. This is not making me feel good. So really listen to those feelings and using it as a prompt to say, I'm going to hold back now for a second, or I'm going to have a day for myself to reflect on all of this. So really using those feelings. The other thing is that what can be quite difficult is because if we're a people pleaser, we've spent our whole lifetime looking after other people's needs that we won't even know what we need. How do we even start to know, oh my gosh, okay, I've got a day off to myself. What do I even do with that day off? Other than give to people, I don't know what else to do. There could be a whole panic. So I think just really slowing down and taking that time, and even just going back to basics. If you were a baby, what would you need? You need food, water, rest, a cuddle. Just starting there and then building as you go along. Find out what things you like, what things you don't like. Take yourself on a date. Learn how to please yourself. You know, how would you want those people to treat you? Or actually, how you're treating people is probably an indication of how you want to be treated anyway. So just turn those things inwards. And then the guilt is going to be inevitable. I think it's just being with it, sitting with it, and reminding yourself that actually this is the only way that I can look after myself. I do care about those people, yes, and I love them, but I also have to care and love for myself first. Otherwise, there won't be anything left of me to give. So it's kind of having those kind of real talk conversations with yourself. Something kind of you named there actually was like how when you've been giving somebody cake for however long, they're going to expect it, and they're probably going to get a bit angry and a bit annoyed, like, where's my cake? I'm really hungry. And that's fine, you know, they're going to be shocked, and that's okay. But I was just explaining that, you know, I've noticed that I give a lot of cake, and that makes me feel a bit resentful or tired. And so from now on, I'm not going to give as much cake. I can teach you how to make the cake, but to look after myself, I'm gonna stop giving the cake. And what you're doing there is you're naming your feelings without saying you took all my energy, or, you know, without projecting onto that person. You're naming your feelings, you're naming the facts, and you're also saying what you need going forward, which is I need to do this for me. And for you, could you learn to make that cake? There's something about having a real honest conversation of, this is about how I love myself, but also love you as well.
I love the fact that that is all about personal responsibility. It starts with the I, which for a people pleaser could be a bit difficult to center themselves in that, but actually that's part of the work, is saying, this is what I have noticed about myself, this is what I need, and then actually asking for that help. You know, can you do this? I think is a wonderful way of redressing that guilt that you might feel for not continuing to people please, but also being honest and giving someone else a chance to help you. Because if you're a people pleaser, perhaps you're someone who doesn't always take help that easily.
Absolutely. Yeah, it can be really hard to ask for help or to know the words, because maybe as a people pleaser, you're seen as the rock for everybody else. And then to say, oh, hey, I need help too, maybe feels a little bit embarrassing, or it might bring shame, or you might fear that those people won't kind of really hear you. So yes, it can be really hard to ask for help. But also when someone's saying, hey, I can help you, they sometimes don't know what to ask for or what help they need. So yeah, using the I is a really great way of strengthening your needs, strengthening kind of the communication between you and you internally.
And I wanted to talk a bit more about help, because you're a psychotherapist and you work with lots of different people. In terms of people pleasing, if someone were to come to you to talk about this, what's the kind of help that a therapist can give someone beyond what we're talking about today? Why would someone perhaps come and see yourself or someone like you to get support with this kind of issue?
It's usually kind of why they would start is they're just noticing that they're emotionally drained, or maybe they're being a bit more snappy. Their capacity has been absolutely reached 5 years ago, and so they're becoming quite snappy because they haven't got the same patience that they expect of themselves because of the people pleasing. So often these are the kind of people that will end up kind of, actually, I need to think about some stuff in therapy here. Or it might be there's some unresolved trauma that also links to it, that's starting to resurface. And then we kind of learn that actually there's some people pleasing behaviors that comes with that. And I guess the role of the therapist there is to hold up a mirror and to kind of say, okay, all of these things are happening. This is you now. This is what's happening now. And hold them accountable for the fact that they're not attending to their own needs, that they're not giving themselves their own cake, and really kind of gently, playfully challenging that tendency. Even with children that I've worked with, it's very common for children to come into the therapy room and they're like super sweet and super tidy and just kind of really people pleasing, because I'm an adult and an authority, and so they want to be a good boy, good girl, good child. And so my job is kind of like, no, we can get messy in here. Let's get messy. Come on, let's kind of do the things that you're trying not to do. Let's do them here. This is the place where we can be messy. We can prioritize yourself so that you have then that practice, that rehearsal for the outside world. So it's allowing them to really rehearse. And one thing I noticed actually is when someone's been a people pleaser, it's really hard to take up space in a therapy session for 50 minutes. Talk about themselves. It can be really hard. And so you notice, the little ways that they divert the topic, or they start talking about somebody else, or start to criticize themselves. Like, these are also signs of what they do outside the therapy session. So we can kind of really tackle them in the here and now.
And will a people pleaser be used to coping alone, making that therapy session, kind of even more important if it's something they're able to do? Because as you said, the therapist can hold up a mirror, they can hold them accountable. And actually, if they have been quite self-sustaining for a long period of time, perhaps they do need someone to challenge them in that way and actually show them or get them to talk about where they are trying to minimize themselves, or perhaps go back to behaviours because they can say that such and such needs them and they're the only person who can help.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. It's kind of like a bit of a reality check. Are you the only person that can help so and so? Maybe so and so is actually more capable than you think they are. It's those conversations, and really allowing them to see the patterns that they're stuck in, and where does that come from? Especially when someone's experienced trauma, or maybe their parents weren't able to meet their needs, and that's why they then put their own needs to the back of everything. So often, for example, someone who might have had a parent with alcohol misuse or mental health, that it can happen there that those children will end up developing a fawn response or people-pleasing response, because they've had to really listen out for that person's behavior all the time and not necessarily checking on themselves. So in the therapy session, it almost becomes like a reparative space. It's almost like the therapist can be that caregiver that client always needed, to be emotionally available, to be emotionally responsive, to really tune into, how are you feeling right now? What do you need? Which is what they needed way back then. They can have that now in the therapy session. And it's almost like repairing the wound a little bit and teaching them how to do that for themselves.
What I hear from everything you're saying is that people pleasing, it shows up in so many different areas and taps back into so many different experiences, that there are almost different levels, almost different kind of depths of people pleasing. And there are many ways in which we can help ourselves, but also there might be some in which we need that help of a therapist, like you were saying, if there's particularly the roots are in trauma and perhaps not having the availability of a parent, or if you just know that you need somebody else to support you on this journey to move away from people pleasing. And a final question on this is one really of a bit of hope for anyone who's listening, who's a people pleaser. What does a life without people pleasing look like?
Oh, I like that question. As somebody that kind of works through my own people pleasing tendencies and behaviors, it becomes more colorful. That's a really weird way of describing it, but it becomes more colorful because you start to live your life and your story in the way that you want to live it. You suddenly have more time to do the things that you've always wanted to do. You suddenly have friendships that are more meaningful, because the ones that were just there to make use of all of your cake and eat all of your cake kind of do no longer kind of, I don't know how to describe that. I guess like certain friendships change, and that can be difficult and sad, but it can also be really joyful, because it means that the friendships that you do have are a lot more deep and more meaningful. There are definitely difficult parts, but through all of that, there's so much more color and authenticity and joy, because you're getting closer to who you are rather than who people need you to be.
That's beautiful. And what an amazing place to end at when we're talking about people pleasing. We will have an article that goes alongside this podcast, but I really recommend that you check out Tasha's Instagram account and find out more direct from her, because you are a font of great accessible knowledge. I love watching what you do, and it really does make me think about my own behavior as well. Can you share with everyone where they can find you and how they can contact you?
Yeah, so you can find me on realtalk.therapist on Instagram. Feel free to DM me there. And yeah, my email and everything is on there for people to contact me as well.
So we'll link that in the show notes as well, but please do check it out. It is quite magnificent. I thank you so much. This has been a lovely conversation. I'm off to get some cake now after all that talk, that talk about cake. I hope we'll speak again soon. But Tasha, thank you. It's been wonderful.